Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I'm chair of APA's New Urbanism Division, and I'm your webcast moderator. Today is Friday, September 13th, and we will be hearing the presentation, Bus Rapid Transit, Insight on Project Development and Implementation. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the chat box found in your webcast toolbar. For your content questions related to the presentation, again, just type those in the chat box located in your webcast toolbar. We will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. I ask if your question is for a particular panelist that you list their name in the question you are asking. Coming up on your screen is a list of our sponsoring APA chapters and divisions for 2019. Thanks to all of our participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible and free to members. Today's webcast, in particular, is sponsored by APA's Transportation Planning Division. So thanks to them for sponsoring today's webcast. Coming up next on your screen is a list of our upcoming webcasts. You can register for our webcasts by heading over to ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. You will notice a couple things on the screen here in red. You'll see that we have some time changes. We normally have our webcasts from 1 to 2:30 Eastern time on Fridays. And just in terms of logistics, we are backing up 3 of our upcoming webcasts so that our panelists are able to join us. And we will also have a Wednesday webcast coming up here in October. I'm actually today going to be updating a lot of information, so make sure you check back early next week because we'll have a lot more of these sessions available for you to register for. Today's webcast is available for 1.5 CM credits for live viewing only. We do have some recorded webcasts that are available for on-demand distance education. We have an ethics and a law, and you can get more information and links to those sessions by visiting our webcast webpage that's listed again at the bottom of your screen. To log today's credits, just head over to planning.org and log into your MyAPA account, and then you can search either by the title of today's webcast or the event number, which is listed, and both of these are also found on our webcast webpage. Like us on Facebook, Planning Webcast Series, to receive up-to-date information on our sessions, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Head over to YouTube and search Planning Webcast. Will pop up along with over 300 recorded sessions that we have available. And you know, we already have, I think, a little over 2,500 subscribers. So join in on the fun. And you'll also then get updates when we upload or edit any of our videos. So with that, we are recording today's webcast and it will be available. So make sure you head over to YouTube too if you want to get a copy of it. All right, we'll also have a PDF of the presentation available on our webcast webpage at the conclusion of the session. So with that, I am done with my housekeeping items, and I'm going to turn it over to Justin, who will kick off today's BRT presentation. Justin, the controls are yours. Perfect, looks great.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Justin Stuenberg. I'm the Vice President of Planning and Capital Projects for Indigo, the transit agency in Indianapolis. And as some of you may have heard, we just recently opened our first bus rapid transit line, actually just 13 days ago on September 1st. So it is very fresh in all of our minds. So before I proceed, I just want to let everybody know that because we just opened less than 2 weeks ago, some of these photos are going to be a little bit blurry because I had to steal them from others. They also, there's a couple videos in here that going through the webinar may be a bit choppy. So if that happens, we'll just play through the video and then move on to the next one. So, the next slide here. So what is our red line? So our red line is Bus Rapid Transit. It opened less than 2 weeks ago. It is the first all-electric, battery electric Bus Rapid Transit system. It uses 60-foot battery electric vehicles. And it's a 13.1 mile corridor, and it does traverse kind of the densest corridor in the city. So this is an area that currently experiences pretty good transit ridership as far as Indianapolis is concerned. And so we're kind of doubling down on improvements in that existing corridor. So that's what it is. But this is kind of how we felt about it. We've had a lot of excitement. A lot of people just very much, excited to see a transit investment in Indianapolis. We had not seen a transit investment since before World War II. Basically, the entire period since World War II has been a steady decline in transit usage and supply in Indianapolis. And so we've really not made any investments whatsoever other than a transit center a couple of years ago in transit in Indy. And so it's very exciting to get to this point.
This is just the best video. I got to see it yesterday. It cracks me up, and I love her enthusiasm.
Did that play very well?
Like it did yesterday, but you could totally get the drift that this girl, she is stoked.
Okay. So we also had strong support from all of our elected leaders, our mayor, our congresspeople, basically all across the board. We had pretty strong support, our council president. And so that really helped, bring this project to fruition. So some more stats on the project. It's about a half-mile station spacing on average throughout the corridor. We did replace all local service in the corridor, and so this truly is the only service in the corridor. That did elicit a little bit of pushback, but everything we know from high-quality BRT lines in other cities says that even if the local routes are routine, they don't last very long, because even people say they won't walk to the stations. They do, just because the service is that much better. We've got 10-minute headways all day on weekdays for about 16 hours a day, and then 20 minutes in the late night, super early morning, 15-minute peak on weekends, and again, all through the day. The corridor is about 50,000 people and 150,000 jobs within walking distance of the line, so we classify that as within a half a mile of the station. So that's a pretty tight radius, and so it doesn't really account for the people that are willing to go a little bit further. And it's a very diverse corridor, kind of all ages, races, and incomes. It traverses some of the poorest areas of the city and some of the richest areas of the city. So it really links together a diverse cross-section of the city. And then the total cost of the project was $96.3 million. And this, for what we'd consider a fixed guideway BRT, a very high-quality BRT line, that's a pretty small amount for a 13-mile corridor. So I'll talk a little bit about how we did kind of this quality of service at that price tag. And we're already starting to see development in the corridor. So this is a picture of a building that started construction right next to one of our stations, basically, as we were starting to build our stations. And so we're starting to see a lot more of that in the corridor too. So we've kind of already debunked the theory that BRT doesn't inspire development, which is great. And we've got a lot more kind of in the pipeline that's under construction or in the planning phases. So more stats on the project. It's about 65% dedicated lanes, but critically, those are in the areas of most congestion. So we got the dedicated lanes in the areas in which it was hardest to do so. And the stations are full featured, what we call BRT heavy. So every single station has level boarding, off-board fare collection, Wi-Fi, security cameras, emergency phones. And then they've also got heating coils in the concrete to enable us to melt off the snow, which we don't get a ton of snow compared to some of our northern neighbors, but we do get a lot of ice here. So we have a lot of freezing rain and ice storms. And so we felt it was important to create a safe area that we had that system in place. But critically, and I think this is one of the really big things about BRT that often gets overlooked, is that we just started designing this line in 2015. So to go from the start of design to open for service in about 4 to 4.5 years, I think is pretty amazing, and something that you can't do. You can really only do with a BRT service. You can never do that with a rail project. And those dedicated lanes, and I don't know how well you all can see this, but they work. The dedicated lanes are really providing a lot of benefit in travel time for us, especially as we traverse some of these areas in the corridor that are very traffic plagued. And I'd say that relatively. For those of you who are familiar with Indianapolis, traffic here is really nothing compared to a lot of other major cities, but there are some areas of the city that this line does go through that traffic does get fairly bad. And so having these lanes has enabled us to basically have a consistent travel time throughout the day, regardless if it's AM, PM peak or middle of the day or middle of the night. We're able to basically have a consistent travel time 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is huge for reliability. And it also just visually, it's very appealing to people when they're on the bus and flying past the cars. Just another photo of one of them lit up at night in our downtown area. So our strategy generally for this project is that BRT is and always will be our top of the line service. This is not a bridge to a light rail project, as some other BRT projects are kind of billed as. Ours truly is going to be the top of the line for a couple of reasons. One is that we aren't a terribly dense city, and so we don't really ever envision having the density to support a true light rail project. But specifically, our state legislature actually put a bit of a poison pill in our referendum legislation that outlawed rail service. So we cannot use our transit tax money for rail service. And so that's a very explicit reason why we would not be doing anything higher end than BRT. But that actually suits us fine. I think BRT is the right solution for Indianapolis. But we did want this to be a top of the line BRT service, because knowing that it was always going to be our highest level transit. And we invested heavily in center stations and dedicated lanes because it provided better service, obviously, but also even lower cost. So when we're talking these BRT stations that are full featured, each of those stations is quite expensive, and a lot of that is in the electronics. When we're doing a single center station, we only have to build all those electronics once. When we're doing 2 separate curbside stations, we have to build it twice. And so all that added up to each of our center platform stations was about $650,000. A pair of curbside stations was over $1 million. And so it was almost a $400,000 savings per station area by using center stations. And then with dedicated lanes, we obviously needed fewer buses to run the same service because the service is running more quickly. And so all that adds up to lower cost and better service, which is rare that you get both. But obviously it had trade-offs, and that was within the right of way, taking up road space. But we used those cost savings to invest in the infrastructure of the corridor. And that kind of gave something for everybody, even those who would not be using the service. They still got newly paved streets, fixed sidewalks, new ADA curb ramps, new traffic signals, all the above. And so there really was something in it for everyone. But critically, our project budget would have been about the same whether our project scope was center running dedicated lanes and a full repaving of the street and sidewalks, or if we had just been kind of BRT light with stations on the sides and no dedicated lanes, and we would not have been able to have invested in the infrastructure. And so we felt the direction in our strategy kind of gave something to everybody, but also still made our BRT service really good. And then finally, we had to be innovative. There were a lot of kind of unique features of this line. We were not trying to squeeze a square peg in a round hole. We have a lot of different cross sections in this along this corridor of the street. And so we had to get a little innovative with our different cross sections and try to pick the best lane configuration for each section of the corridor. So I'll touch on a couple of the items we had here. One was our stations in the center. They use a diagonal beam system, which actually, so the support, there's a little cabinet you can see there, and those cabinets serve many purposes. One is to support the structure, but two, they serve as mat boxes. There's a door on there that you can put large posters in, and they're also our enclosure for all of our electronics equipment. So they can be, we have, I believe in this end, we have the electrical panel, and then the other end, we've got all the communications equipment. But that gave us, did a couple things for us. One, just visually, it gives us really good line of sight, so you can see as the buses approach, which has been very well received. But two, it allowed us to make our footprint smaller. So in order to meet ADA, you have to worry about all these obstructions in the path. And so by minimizing the number of obstructions, we were able to shrink our footprint and reduce our cost somewhat for the project. We use a contraflow lane. So this is an area of town that has a one-way southbound street. We did not want to be on a one-way pair. We wanted to stick to one street just because you have to walk to both directions of travel. And so the further apart the stations get, the fewer people that are actually within walking distance. And so we wanted to keep them in one location. But to do that, we had to run two-way service on a one-way street, because basically our entire downtown is on one-way streets. And so we implemented a contraflow lane here, just a single northbound bus only lane to complement a southbound bus only lane, and then 2 or 3 southbound vehicular lanes. And in this area, we did do as you can see, the red pavement treatment because we were concerned about just people not being used to the new configuration. So we wanted to make it very, very obvious. And then in our northernmost section, we used a bidirectional lane system. So basically, at each station, there are 2 lanes, but in between stations, there's just a single lane that the buses traverse in one direction or the other. And they have to hold at a station in order to wait for an oncoming bus to clear. And so we actually had to develop a system in our CAD, which is the picture on the right here, that tells the bus operator when they're supposed to hold at a station and when they can proceed, because that lane is open. Now, it is not really, there is no wall or anything that prevents the buses from getting out of that lane if they need to. If for some reason the system fails, they would just have to merge over a mountable median to merge into traffic and go around each other. But one question that we've gotten on this is, why didn't we do it as a directional lane where basically in the AM peak, the buses take it one way and the other direction buses just use the general traffic lane and vice versa. But in this corridor, it's kind of sandwiched between our two largest business employment districts in the region. And so this area of town actually sees not a terribly off-balance peak direction flow. And so we have quite a bit of traffic in both directions, in both the AM and PM peak. And this section really was a compromise. So we very much, to save on costs, did not want to be widening streets. So we were trying to stay within the curb line of the street. And this section of town, they were very much valued their on-street parking. And so this was basically, we had to retain the on-street parking through here with only a 50-foot curb-to-curb right-of-way. There's no app. These are mostly single-family and duplex and 3 and 4 unit housing. And most of them have very little alley access. And so the on-street parking was very important to them. And I've got another video here that probably won't play, but this is kind of showing that bidirectional lane in action. So you can see that we're actually so constrained that there's a median that actually runs down the middle of the lane that the bus actually straddles. But this was on one of our opening days, and you can see there the interest and excitement was very high for the city. We had packed buses to the point where people physically couldn't fit, which is a good problem to have, but still a problem somewhat that operationally was very challenging. So general lessons learned, if you build a high quality BRT, people will use it as long as it's in the right place. We have, so far, granted it's in the first 2 weeks, but ridership in the corridor is up more than 50%. And it was already our kind of most tightly spaced service. We had the best headways in the city in this corridor already. So we're seeing a big uptake in people using the service. And the system is as strong as its weakest link. So don't compromise the most critical locations. I think we've been very successful in people using the service because there's nowhere along the corridor that you feel like you're bogged down. Everywhere along the corridor moves relatively smoothly because we did get those dedicated lanes in the most critical locations. A couple of things we maybe didn't do quite right. Don't bid the project until your federal funding's in place. We were one of the first small starts grants that were actually awarded by the current administration. And it was delayed by almost 5-6 months compared to what their previous kind of roadmap was. It definitely caused some issues with our contracting because we had already bid the project in anticipation of a grant that did not materialize for 5 to 6 months. We used multiple contractors, one separate one for the stations and one separate one for the roadway work. That worked fine because we don't have a strong, we didn't have many contractors that really could do both, but really need to minimize the number of points of coordination. And then if your agency is not already managing really small headways, 10 minutes or less, it's difficult. It's a very different skill set from your dispatch, and so plan for that. And it's especially an issue with inconsistent docking speeds. So our operators trained along the line for the last 3 or 4 weeks before it opened. Some of them were very comfortable, and some of them were very not comfortable with pulling up to the stations. And so that manifested in very different speeds. And as you can imagine, with about an hour each way in the corridor, if somebody is very much slower than the one behind them, the person behind them will catch up. And then your 10-minute headway goes to 2 buses and then no buses for 20 minutes. So if any of you are planning this, I'd strongly encourage you training your operators to focus on speed first. Once they get comfortable, then start worrying about how close they're getting to the stations and start kind of easing into how close they're getting. And then once the line's open, it's a lot harder to do the operator training. So make sure to plan some time, quite a bit of time there between the end of your construction and the actual service beginning. So we're not done. We have a pretty ambitious BRT program, and our next one is our purple line. That's about 14.8 miles. This is concentrated on a very high poverty, zero-car household corridor. And we are actually bidding this project next summer. So we're just going one after the other. This should be open by 2023. It's about 90% dedicated lane. And we're also using another feature here that, again, probably won't play, but this is a fairly unique feature. It's a left lane business access transit lane, and that allows cars to merge across the left lane bus lane and take a left from the middle turn lane. It enables us to give bus priority while still allowing those left turns. And then finally, our blue line is a 24-mile corridor, basically connects east to west across the entire city that we plan to bid in 2022, and right now it's planned to be 80% dedicated lane. Both blue and purple would be small starts projects through the FTA. And that's all I have. Thank you all very much. I'll pass it off to Carrie.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Carrie Rosepace from Richmond, Virginia. I'll be here to talk with you all about the Pulse. We opened last summer on June 24th, and I have been with the company since March of 2015. I started in the marketing department, and now I oversee customer service as well as marketing. Across the bottom of the screen, you see the different logos for all of our partners, and I will say that this is one of our biggest successes, is that we did have such excellent coordination across multiple levels of jurisdiction, from the local level, which included the city of Richmond, which is the capital city for the Commonwealth of Virginia, Henrico County, which is another local jurisdiction which partnered on this project, our two state agencies, the Department of Rail and Public Transportation and the Department of Transportation, and then of course up to the federal level with the FTA. We did receive a Tiger grant for this, $24.9 million in 2014. We were one of the top 3 largest Tiger grant recipients of that cycle. This is going to be a video that plays for you, and it will be a little choppy, and there's no audio, but it does let you see some of the highlights that we'll be talking about. You're going to see similar BRT features for our system as what you saw in Indy. We will go through these, don't worry, in the presentation.
I just want to interrupt you really quick. Could you minimize your GoToWebinar tool panel? For some reason, it wasn't showing up during our practice, but it's decided to show up now. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you for your help on that. And I'll figure out how to get that out of the way. There we go. We'll just tuck it over here. All right. We do have 2 sponsors, VCU Health and Bon Secours Health System. You'll see their logos along the bottom of the screen. That's something that's similar to maybe other BRTs that you've heard, such as in Cleveland with the Helpline. These are the 2 largest healthcare systems here in Richmond, and we're really excited to have them be our partners for sponsoring the service. We are a modern, high-quality, high-capacity bus rapid transit system. We do operate at 10-minute frequency all day on weekdays from 6 a.m. until 7 p.m. That is in part because of a partnership with VCU, the university itself, where they are also contributing to our operating cost, and their financial contribution enabled us to turn up that frequency from 15 minutes all day to every 10 minutes all day. We are still 15-minute frequency off-peak and 30 minutes late at night. That's 11:30 p.m. until about 1:30 in the morning. We do use off-board fare collection with an on-board proof of payment to check. Our vehicles are run on compressed natural gas. Our fleet as a whole, we are committed as a property to transitioning away from diesel and gasoline to compressed natural gas. We have our own CNG fueling station on site at our headquarters. And our entire Pulse fleet is run on CNG. We have 13 vehicles in the fleet. We usually run 9 on at a single time on weekdays. And on Sundays, when we have a little bit less service, it's about 6 vehicles. We have 14 station locations on our 7.6-mile route. Of that distance, 3.2 miles are dedicated bus-only lanes. Part of them are on the curbside, and part of them are in the median, and we'll get into that in just a moment. As I mentioned, we were a Tiger grant recipient, one of the largest of 2014 at $24.9 million, and then the localities also contributed their portion, but I will draw your attention to the Commonwealth of Virginia's contribution, which exceeded the federal contribution. So the state really stepped up in a huge way to make this project possible, and not just financially. They contributed staff time and their expertise. VDOT handled the design build procurement process and contract oversight, and DRPT, of course, as the planning and implementation body. So our total cost for the 7.6-mile route was $64.9 million. We were one of the lowest cost BRTs in recent time. And I think part of that is not just because of the efficiencies that we found, but it is important to note that we did not acquire right-of-way with this project, so we were working exclusively within existing right-of-way. So this is our route. I know there are a lot of colors on here, so I'm going to work from the left side of your screen in the west end to the right side of your screen in the east end. At the bottom, you'll see there's the James River. We are a river city, so we do have a beautiful river that runs through town. The downtown area, most of that density is north of the river, and most of the road that we're looking at here is called Broad Street. GRTC actually was the very first transit system in the United States to run a streetcar trolley, the electric streetcar trolley. We beat out, I think, Birmingham, Alabama by 2 weeks, more than 100 years ago. So this is actually a similar route to where we did used to operate streetcar trolleys in the middle of the street. So what's old is new again, except for using buses instead of trolleys or rail. In the west end, where you see the blue and the purple lines, that's where we're operating in mixed flow traffic. The roadway is 3 lanes on each side, plenty of space to navigate, and we're serving curbside. Once we get into the green and yellow section in the middle of the map, that's where we're in the middle of the street, and we're operating in dedicated bus-only lanes. That's where we get most of our time savings and our best speed. Once we got into the downtown area, much denser, that's where you see the orange. That's the government center, BC Medical Center, the large hospital, our convention center. There's a lot going on there. The state capitol is there. City Hall is there as well. We're operating in dedicated bus-only lanes on the curb side. Then we turn onto Main Street for the rest of the route, which is pink and purple on your map, and we're operating in curbside stations, but not dedicated lanes. Our stations, you're actually going to see some similar features to what you just saw from Indigo. We also have wood. Ours is cedar that's underneath. Steel beams. Our stations were designed to speak the architectural language of historic Richmond, which is known for its train trestles, its train history, and lots of red brick, which you can see in the background of this picture. And our stations have red brick walls and lower knee walls. Our stations are up about 15 inches off of the roadway, so the photo on the right is showing you how the bus is docking flush with the platform. We calibrated our buses at our maintenance facility to dock seamlessly with our platforms, and these are all done by the operators. There is no operated or computer guidance. This is all human skill that's docking with platforms. We do have much more ridership than we even hoped, which is a wonderful thing. We were expecting to have about 3,500 riders every weekday, but we have never, ever dropped that low. Even in our first quarter of operation, we were more than 5,200 riders every weekday, and now we're closing in on 7,000 riders every weekday. This is in part not just because of people getting on board a better service and more frequent service and benefiting from that, but we've also had VCU, the university, partner with GRTC on providing unlimited transit access for their students, faculty, and staff through a service agreement that we have with VCU, and they take advantage of connecting between their 2 campuses along the route on the Pulse and one of our other routes. Which leads me to the bigger picture. I know we're here to talk about BRT, but GRTC is the only transit system to date that not only launched a BRT, a new form of rapid transportation, but the very same day changed every local bus route. Every single route changed. We had not touched our bus routes much, really, in the last 30, 40, or even 50 years, some people could argue. And many of our bus routes were legacy routes based on the old streetcar trolley routes. And it was long overdue for us to take a comprehensive look at how people need to connect across the city and the broader region into the counties that we serve as well. So we did a comprehensive transit, let's wipe the slate clean, let's bring in some outside experts as well as really dig down into significant community engagement and find out what this will look like. And the result is that when we made these changes in June and September of last year, since then our ridership as a whole is now up 18%. And the national average is, of course, for a decline in transit ridership. But what we have found is that when you place more useful service for more people, then you're going to get more riders. Now, I know that this map is small. I don't want you to be able to read it. I just want you to see the colors, and I'll blow it up on the next slide. But I'll draw your attention first to the red lines on the map. You'll see them going from north to south and a couple going from east to west. Those are 15-minute routes on our local system, and the Pulse is that lime green line that's snaking through the middle of that map. So this is our first time offering frequent transit service, and we went from 0 miles of frequent transit service to 43 miles of frequent transit service, and it's through these, we call them trunk routes, going north, south, east, west, connecting into the spine of our network, which is now the Pulse. So here's that map a little bit bigger. Blue represents 30-minute routes, so you'll see them across the north side, the east end, and the south side of the city. And there's, of course, the James River going right through the middle of Richmond. And then the almost a hunter green shade, those are the hourly routes that you're getting into some of the less dense parts of the region farther away from downtown. This is a view looking to the east from the median lanes. We have bidirectional median lanes, so we have space for the eastbound buses to stay in an eastbound lane and the westbound buses to stay in a westbound lane. As a result of this, we do have split platforms, so you will see an eastbound platform and a westbound platform separate from each other, but of course they are positioned at signalized intersections where there is space for them to have pedestrian safe access going to and from the stations. Before I move off this picture, you'll see in the top right area the bus only signal, the bus only signage. At this example, we did not allow left turns, but along our route, as you'll see later, we do permit protected left turns. Actually, if you look a bit farther in this picture into where it gets a little blurry, where our other bus is the rear of it, you'll see an SUV that's in the dedicated left turn lane. The bus in that photo has the right of way, so the left turn vehicle is waiting until it can proceed. The pedestrian crossing access on Broad Street was not great before this project. So because most of the route is through the city of Richmond, the city really championed, let's upgrade our pedestrian infrastructure, not just at station areas, but at other pedestrian crossings all along the route. So there are brand new marked pedestrian crossings, including pedestrian refuge in the middle of the street, and a brand new median, which in some cases is as wide as 6 feet, to permit some pedestrian refuge for human behavior, which can mean not everyone is crossing at signalized intersections. This is an aerial view where you can see on the right-hand side our dedicated bus-only lanes, as well as the travel lanes, and this is another example where you can see a dedicated vehicular left turn that is permitted at times, but the bus still gets priority. The buses are talking to the traffic signals all along the way. We do use TSP, which is Transit Signal Priority, and that ensures that we stay on time. Of course, we are going to get most of our time savings and expedience in the bus-only lanes in the middle of the street. Our average speed is actually faster than what we scheduled. We were anticipating that we'd be going about 11 miles per hour. That's the average, of course, but we're actually up to 12 to 13 miles per hour on average, which is excellent. Some of our real-time arrival features on the left, we were a little innovative with this. The Totem, which serves as the name and the direction for the station identification, actually has little green lights that light up as the bus is getting closer. So if I were across the street or in that park in the background, I could just look over at the Totem, and once I see that the lights are lighting up, that means I have less than 5 minutes to get to the platform, validate my fare, and wait for the bus to arrive. On the right photo, you'll see that we have overhead real-time arrival. Of course, there's an audio component, so you can push the button if you need to hear that and are not able to see it. And we show the next 2 buses that are coming. This photo was taken when we were on 15-minute frequency. As I mentioned, we do use off-board fare collection. Our ticket vending machines come from Scheidt and Bachman. They can accept credit, debit, cash, coin, issue change, and of course, read all of our smart fare media. We do have a mobile app that lets people pay with their phone, and they don't have to wait in line at the ticket vending machine. We have 3 scanning locations. That's what the photo on the right is showing. So you can bypass the ticket vending machine and just scan your pass from your phone there and keep it moving. These are some screenshots of what the mobile pass looks like. We did work really hard with GenFare to make sure that we were preventing fraud, and that included having a moving clock once people activated it, and some watermarks to mitigate people taking a screenshot and passing that off as a pass. We do have real human beings that are on the buses, fare enforcement inspectors. They are unarmed, but they are contracted with GRTC to on and off the buses, doing a sweep, kind of like a train conductor checking for tickets. They can do visual inspection or use the handheld scanner, which is what the fare enforcer on the right is holding to read our smart fare media. Other features that we have at the stations, we have seating and lean rails. It was actually really funny. I'll use my mouse here. You can see the lean rails right here. People weren't using them, and we didn't understand why at first. And it's because they thought that it was public art. So we had to explain that, no, that's where when you're standing, you can just take some of the weight off and lean. And so now they're pretty heavily used. The spaces in between the benches and the lean rail and the bench are used for individuals' immobility devices. I will say that one of the other unique features about our stations is this glass along the rear. It does serve as an artistic interpretation of the route itself. You can see the line here, neighborhoods that are being mentioned, but we don't specifically call it the station names here in the glass. But in the glass, there's a QR code, and that's what this tighter picture is. So when you hold up your smartphone camera, it will recognize that you're trying to read this QR code, and it will launch a little mini website that gives you information about what's happening around you, what other bus routes there might be to connect with, are there cool restaurants to eat at, are there events happening nearby. We have an event calendar. So we really like that feature, and it has been used. It will be updated actually around the holidays. We're going to be adding some historic information as well to the site in partnership with VCU. We do have emergency call boxes, and I will mention this is one of our lessons learned. This is the call box right here. There is not a protective cover around it for ADA reasons, but the trade-off is that people with backpacks or purses or not paying attention and just leaning on this rail will accidentally hit the emergency button. So we're having to deal with silent 911 calls. And I'll give credit to our emergency response. They have been top-notch, coming out every single time somebody accidentally hits it, and they will personally ask everyone at the station, are you okay? Are you okay? We do have security cameras. You can see them here, both underneath, around, and on the back side of the platform. They are live, both with color and audio, so that we can see and hear, if needed, what's going on. The lights themselves are adaptive to the ambient brightness. So on a really, really sunny day, the lights tone down because they don't need to work as hard, and then at night they turn up. Bike access. This was extremely important to the community when we were developing the Pulse. Our buses, all of our bike storage is on the outside. That is different from Indigo. Indigo has larger vehicles. Ours are 40 feet. Theirs are 60 feet. So we had to put all of our bike storage on the outside. We did research what it would take to remove some seats on the inside and do interior bike storage. And at least as we started, we wanted to focus on maintaining that seating because our ridership has just been so high. We know that we need those seats, and the bike capacity, we can hold 3 on the outside. We did build ramps so that people can walk down the ramp and load their bike from the street level and then walk back up the ramp to board the bus. This is another video that I'm going to play, and again, it will be a little choppy, but this is one of the marketing pieces that we shared. You're going to see, again, it might be a little choppy, different themes from Richmond. Being outside, connecting with the school, connecting with the arts community. Really, it was important to show Richmond and Henrico County what it's like, how you can connect with the destinations that you love, that you're already familiar with, all over the community, and then to have that time savings, because you are going to get there faster to these destinations than you would on a traditional bus, and it gives you more time for all these things in life that you love, being with your family, going to sport, going out to eat with friends. And all of the places that you see featured in our marketing are local partners that we've worked with and built relationships with over the last several years so that they could be a part of this service, be a part of the fabric itself. This is my contact information. I did want to verbally tell you a few of just my thoughts. Some of our triumphs, I think it really helps to have a free ride week, at least whenever you're launching this new service, because you want to remove that barrier of fear and uncertainty for people so that they can just take it easy, get on the bus, get off, hop on and off all week, take their time to get to learn the service. And then, of course, it's just an exciting thing to be able to try something new. Our ridership, as I mentioned, has far exceeded anything that we hoped or expected. So we're really pleased with that and appreciative of the partnerships that we have, especially with VCU, because they have such a large rider base. There's more than 55,000 people in the VCU community who can take advantage of this service. So we're really glad to have that. The safety features that I talked about have been essential, and we have been so lucky because when you dedicate bus-only lanes, especially in the middle of the street, you're minimizing conflict with other vehicles. And so we have been very lucky to have an extremely low incident rate of really just minor things, people accidentally hitting the mirror, which happens a lot with trucks going by anyway on regular local service. But we have been very fortunate with that. Designing this, it was important to talk about the safety for all users. And as I mentioned, we still have left turn lanes, which are protected for other automobiles. We have new pedestrian crossings that didn't exist prior to this project, and in some cases, new traffic lights that didn't exist prior to this project. Bus-only lanes are essential to the success, and it is important that you have a locality that will help you with that enforcement, even if it's just in the beginning with awareness about how does this work. And I think that that is important to the success. I will note you saw in Indigo's presentation that they had the red pavement. That was also in our design earlier on in about the 30% phase, but for budget reasons, we took it out. It would have been a pretty high maintenance ticket item for the city of Richmond to take on if there were the red lanes, but we still have it as an option in the future if we do think that we need it. I would say a lesson learned is that pedestrians are going to do what pedestrians want to do. And you may design all the safety, markings, infrastructure, signage, gates, everything that you think would prevent somebody from stepping where they shouldn't, into the landscaping, into the middle of the bus-only lane, skateboarding in the bus-only lane. But people will still do this. And our operators have just been incredible at staying alert for all these possibilities. Cyclists in the bus-only lane. Skateboarders, we've tried reaching out to the skateboarding community, but there are a couple of stations, one in particular, where sometimes the skateboarders will pop out of either their store or their apartments nearby, and will start putting skateboard grease on the platform so that they can do tricks on our sweet platforms. But it's not safe, and we are really trying to communicate with them about why we don't want them in the middle of the street, not just because of us, the bus, but because of other traffic that may not be able to see them if they suddenly appear out of the bus-only lane. Vandalism has not been rampant for us, but you do need to budget for it. We have the beautiful glass that I showed you at our stations, but people, for whatever reason, like to climb up and then dangle down from the top of the glass. And if they swing hard enough, then they can crack the glass. The glass is designed not to shatter and hurt anybody, but it is a pain to have to repair. And because it's borderline art, it takes a specialty glass person to fix it. The last thing that I will mention before I hand it off is training for your operators. We were incredibly fortunate for one of our jurisdictions, Henrico County. They have a large park and ride lot in the west end of Henrico County, and they granted us permission to build one of our platforms, one of our station platforms out there. Not the full thing with all the brick and the glass and the steel, but the basics for docking and the logistics that an operator would have to navigate to dock with the platform. And they built that more than a year in advance. So we were able to start training our operators more than a year before we ever started the on-the-street training in the bus-only lanes and on the route. And that gave the operators much greater confidence and comfort with docking before they ever had to go live onto the route itself. That is it for me at this moment. So I'm going to get this back up. I'm going to minimize here, so bear with me while you might see some things on my screen. And I'm going to pass this on over to David.
Hey, David, did you get the notification to
Yes.
show your screen?
Yes, this is David. Hello?
Ah, yeah,
Hi.
you look great and your screen looks great.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Once again, my name is David Olivo, and a little about me. I'm a senior city planner for the Los Angeles Department of City Planning. I've been with the department for 13 years, and I've been working in the Community Planning Division in the San Fernando Valley the last couple of years. My focus has been to update land use plans, particularly around transit infrastructure. And previously, I worked with the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority for about 7 years. Today, I will talk about the department's work on the Orange Line Transit Neighborhood Plan effort, which is looking to shape zoning and land use regulations that will apply to future development projects in several neighborhoods surrounding the Orange Line, a BRT line in Los Angeles' San Fernando Valley. So I'm going to be talking generally about the BRT, but really focusing in on the land use transportation connectivity and how this hopefully will help to encourage ridership and activate station areas and neighborhoods. So my presentation is going to be broken up into 4 parts: an introduction on how the Orange Line came to exist, where it goes, and the role that it plays in LA's transit network. The local context, the expansion of LA's transit system, how it was funded, along with some state mandates around greenhouse gas reductions and sustainability. And then the TNP vision for 2040, what do we hope to achieve through the new set of land use regulations and zoning laws? And finally, some of the land use and zoning tools that we will be having in our arsenal that will allow us to create better TOD plans that are equitable and sustainable for the city. So this is some background and historical information on the Orange Line. The right-of-way was sold to Metro in 1991 by Southern Pacific Railroad. The first phase opened in 2005 from North Hollywood to Warner Center, which is shown in the graphic. So on the right side, which is the eastern end, is North Hollywood, and to the left on the western, or in the western part of the San Fernando, is Warner Center. There was an extension to Chatsworth, which is not shown in this graphic, which opened in 2012. So if you go from Warner Center, you head north, that would take you to Chatsworth. I'll show that in a future slide. And this project was funded by 2 propositions, A and B, which passed in 1980 and 1990 respectively. So today the Orange Line serves about 22,000 riders, quite a bit of riders. That's down probably about 3,000 or 4,000 from a few years ago. As Carrie mentioned, there's been this decline in transit ridership. It includes an excellent community amenity, an 18-mile bicycle pedestrian path that runs adjacent to the route. Over the next several years, the busway will be upgraded with priority signalization, crossing gates, and limited grade separations at a cost of over $300 million. As a result, travel time across the entire route is estimated to decrease by 16 minutes, and ridership could increase by 10,000 passengers a day. The long-term plan is to convert the route to light rail by approximately 2050, and there is funding for that through the latest measure that was passed, Measure M in 2016. So I'm going to pull back a bit and talk briefly about the big transit picture in Los Angeles. This is a map of the current rail and BRT transit system in Los Angeles County. The system started to develop with the first half-cent sales tax in LA County in 1980. At the top left corner is the location of the San Fernando Valley circled in orange. And right now, as you can see, you just have the Orange Line BRT, and there's a red line from downtown that connects to it at the NorthHollywood Station. So this is the graphic of what we hope the transit network can look like in the future. The transit network in LA is growing rapidly, as you can see on the map, and this map shows existing transit lines as well as planned transit lines. In the future, transit will become a lot more feasible option for a greater percentage of Angelenos. The county now has 4 half-cent sales taxes in place to fund transit infrastructure expansion and operations. The last 2 measures were passed in 2008 and 2016. The San Fernando Valley will have several more rail and BRT lines built out over the next several decades through 2050. So a couple of photos here, or renderings. On the left is a rendering of a light rail line that is about to enter the design phase. This line connects with the Orange Line to the south at the Van Nuys Station, and I will talk about that station specifically in a little bit. The second rendering is what a median running BRT in the San Fernando Valley could look like. There are 2 other BRT lines proposed for the valley, but they would be located on existing streets as opposed to a dedicated right-of-way, as is the case with the Orange Line. State and regional government agencies have set goals for climate change, including reduction of greenhouse gases, and mandated local governments to implement policies to achieve these targets by requiring the coordination of planning for transportation and land use. These are basically targets set to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by the years 2020 and 2030 to levels below the year 1990. So this is the environment that we deal with in California and in Los Angeles. So one of the key ways that we plan sustainably in Los Angeles is by planning for growth around hubs and corridors and within areas that have access to transit. Transit neighborhood planning involves planning for development within walking distance of transit stations that offer multimodal transportation options, which means that these sites can be easily accessed by a number of different groups, including residents, workers, and visitors. Because of this, they provide a mix of uses in a relatively dense context and often incorporate public benefits such as affordable housing, neighborhood amenities, and publicly accessible open space. Our planning effort is funded by a grant from Metro secured in 2014. So this is a map of the entire Orange Line BRT facility, which includes 18 stations from North Hollywood to the east to Chatsworth, which is located 18 miles northwest. We are focusing on three station areas east of the 405 freeway, which is that line right in the middle of the map there. Sepulveda, Van Nuys, and North Hollywood stations. Although there are several other stations in the area, these three were deemed the best candidates to increase capacity for more housing and employment due to the organic growth that has already occurred around these stations, as well as existing land use patterns. In addition, there's less single-family zoning adjacent to these stations, which makes any proposed rezoning less controversial. So a couple of photos of the existing BRT. To the left is the North Hollywood Station. This is the eastern terminus of the BRT. And on the right is the bicycle and pathway facility that I mentioned. It's really a nice facility that goes through the entire route, and it's very well utilized by the community, and people feel really, really good about it in their neighborhood. And here's another station on the left. This is located in the western part of the San Fernando Valley. As you can see, it probably could use a little bit of development around the station. It's located kind of like in the middle of nowhere. If you're there, it actually looks a little bit bigger, so this actually tightens it up. The other graphic is the actual dedicated busway facility. So there's a picture. So as I mentioned earlier, the three stations we are planning around, the Sepulveda, Van Nuys, and North Hollywood stations, the plan will guide development through 2040. At the same time, we are proposing to rezone certain properties around stations. Our department is also rewriting the city's zoning code in order to create more flexible zoning tools that will allow us, among other things, to create zoning specifically suited for transit-oriented development. The Van Nuys and Sepulveda stations first. We view the Van Nuys and Sepulveda stations holistically. Downtown Van Nuys is the civic center for the San Fernando Valley, so it plays an important role for the area. There is quite a bit of industrially zoned land between these two stations, and we would like to preserve but upgrade this area. We want to better accommodate 21st century businesses and some of them have already started to locate here. This would be accomplished by allowing more floor area and require a higher level of design, landscaping, and emphasizing the pedestrian and transit connectivity experience. We are also proposing to encourage more mixed-use developments near the stations to promote a variety of housing types and activate the neighborhoods. The third station, which is the North Hollywood Station. This station is the eastern terminus of the Orange Line and the northern terminus of the Red Line subway that goes directly to downtown Los Angeles. It is also where two other BRT projects are proposed to begin, one heading east to Pasadena and the other heading north and then traversing across the northern San Fernando Valley. We want to continue to see this area develop as a regional center for the eastern half of the San Fernando Valley and encourage public amenities with new development, including pedestrian-friendly streetscapes, a mix of retail and services, and open space. Currently, it's one of the few areas of the San Fernando Valley that has a diversity of land uses, a tight street pattern, and transit access that give it an urban vibe through the evening hours. So we intend to use a base development right system or a bonus development right system to incentivize public benefits. In other words, we'll allow greater building potential if in return we receive public benefits such as affordable housing or public open space. Through all this, we need to comply with state laws in California, and we have a few of them, and an LA City voter-approved housing measure as we develop our system. It's known as Transitorium Communities. The overall goal is to maximize production of new affordable housing while encouraging preservation of existing rent-stabilized units, but also activating neighborhoods. In the previous slide, I mentioned the voter-approved program. This is known as Measure JJJ and was passed in 2016. In short, developers are allowed to build bigger and with more units as long as they set aside a certain proportion of housing units as affordable housing. As part of Measure JJJ, the Planning Department was tasked to create guidelines known as the Transit-Oriented Communities TOC guidelines that allow for increased development rights around identified transit stations as shown in the map in blue circles. The dark blue center areas closest to the stations allow for the most intense development potential. This system has been very successful. For example, it accounted for 75% of all affordable units proposed in the city of LA in the first quarter of 2019. With our proposed zoning, we would like to memorialize these incentives and benefits since they are set to expire after 10 years per the measure. And we will accomplish our rezoning effort with the help of our new zoning code. It is the first comprehensive rewrite of LA's zoning code since it was first adopted in 1946. It is a modular, flexible code that gives us better tools to create more nuanced zoning that gives stakeholders more certainty. It is broken up into logical components: form, frontage, standards, use, and density. We are very hopeful that this new system will help enable better development near transit stations and in turn encourage more complete transit-oriented neighborhoods. So the speakers before me focused on the BRT transit infrastructure, and I have presented on land use and zoning, which regulates activity in the private realm or private property. The third leg of an effective transit-oriented neighborhood is creating a public realm that encourages individuals to use transit. This happens when the public right-of-way, that is street sidewalks or alleys, are improved to encourage connections to stations via walking, bicycling, or other transit. LA Metro recently led a series of walkabouts with several departments in the city, including planning and DOT, to inventory and document deficiencies and opportunities with regard to first and last mile connectivity. They created a report that cataloged their findings and recommended several improvements, including streetscape improvements, wayfinding, and lighting improvements that could be implemented in the future. This included cost estimates and potential funding sources. So the next steps for our planning effort. Once again, I spoke about the planning benefits incentive system. So we really need to nail down what those are for each station. Each station the land value of each station area is a little bit different. So some areas can definitely allow developers to give more back in terms of benefits to the city, such as open space. Others probably can only afford to give or provide affordable housing. Also working with our new zoning code to really nail down the TOD zoning requirements for each station. And this being California, we have to clear this project environmentally, and that's a very heavy lift, so that's a lot of our workload as well. And then we'll continue to do public outreach to make sure that this planning effort is something that the community really looks forward to. So that's my presentation. I'm the lead planner on this effort here, and my coworkers, Linnell Washington and Jordan Effort, are also providing much of the assistance. And with that, I'll hand it back to Christine.
Hey, great, thank you. We have a lot of questions coming in, folks. If you have them, go ahead, type them in. Remember to let me know who you want to answer the question if it doesn't appear to be obvious. So let's start off with Justin. There's quite a few questions for you. First of all, the Indigo Red Line, how much does it cost to ride?
Total cost or fare is $1.75, and it's includes a two-hour transfer window, and there's no like zonal fares or anything. It's just a flat fee.
Okay. I'm going to stick with you for a couple questions. What was the traffic volume in the corridor before the project? And was there a travel lane repurposed?
Yeah, so It actually is on a couple different street segments, and so it varies. But I think probably the most critical was our Meridian Street segment, which it's on for about a little over 3 miles. Traffic, the configuration before our construction was basically parking on each side and then 2 travel lanes in each direction. There wasn't really enough room for that. The outside travel lane was only like 8 or 9 feet wide, so it was about 55 feet. It had about 23 to 25,000 cars per day on that street. Our new configuration is parking just on one side, 1 vehicular travel lane in each direction, and 1 bus lane in each direction. So in that section, as well as all the other dedicated lane sections, yes, we did repurpose existing vehicular lanes for the bus lanes. We have not. We're planning to do a traffic study within the next year to see kind of what the volumes changed to. But obviously, with us just opening, we haven't actually done that yet.
Thanks. And can you bring bikes on board?
We can. We have 2 bikes inside the vehicle, 2 bike racks inside the vehicle. You board through the rear door, and then you can lock those into place. The racks themselves are working quite well. The problem is the quantity. We're having an awful lot of people, at least for these first couple of weeks, and especially on the weekends. They want to, go on a long bike ride, so they want to jump on this and take it all the way to the end, and then get off and then bike their way back, which is great. Except we just physically can't fit that many bikes on the bus. At one point, somebody tried to bring 6 bikes on the bus, which is it creates an unsafe situation. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, yes, we can bring bikes on board, and they're working. The racks are working well, but be careful what you wish for in terms of how many people actually use
it. Well, I'm sure, I guess knowing Indy weather, perhaps that won't be as big of an issue in the next coming months, but for the summer, for those peak times, that can be an issue, can it?
Yep.
We have a couple questions related to headway spacing. And the first couple of questions are related to what is headway spacing? So if you could give a definition of that.
Yeah, so basically a traditional bus route that is typically every 15 minutes or longer is just scheduled based on a regular schedule. There's time points that the driver is supposed to hit at certain times, and that's how they manage things. Once you get down into the 10-minute neighborhood, that the spacing between buses gets more kind of susceptible to what's called bunching, where 2 buses get too close to each other. And when that happens, the bus in front tends to pick up all the passengers, and the bus behind doesn't pick up anybody because the bus in front just picked everybody up. And then they get even closer together, and so it really kind of snowballs from there. And so that when you get about the 10-minute headway, where there's a bus every 10 minutes, that starts to get more challenging, and so you have to start scheduling things in a bit different way. And the big challenge there is you just try to the public schedule, you just say a bus every 10 minutes, and it doesn't matter actually what time they arrive. But it does get really complicated when you're trying to do driver reliefs, or one driver is trying to take room for another driver. Those get really complicated because you don't know exactly where the bus is going to be at any given time.
Let's do another definition, docking speeds. Could you talk about that for a moment?
Sure. So as Carrie mentioned, the driver docking, as they pull up to a station, we need them to get within a reasonable distance, and it's basically just all in driver skill. You may have noticed a blue line in our photos, that basically the operator has a little line in their dashboard that they line up with that line as they're pulling up. But some are, they've always been taught to never hit the curb, and now we're telling them, try to get as close as you can to the curb, and if you bump it, it's not that big of a deal. And so it's a very different mindset. And so when one operator takes, 5 seconds to pull up and 5 seconds to pull away because they're really comfortable, but the one in front of them takes 20 seconds to pull up and 20 seconds to pull away because they're really not very comfortable doing that, then the one behind tends to catch up very quickly. And the reason they need to get fairly close is because with the level boarding, we need to have a small gap there. We do have what's called bridge plates. They're small little ramps that can pop out to bridge a gap of up to about a foot. And those work really well. But we do need them at least to get within a foot, because if they don't do that, then it's basically like walking the plank. The bridge plate just like comes out and it doesn't actually hit the platform. And so that's a challenge.
Okay, thanks. We'll do another question for you, and then we'll give you a break. But back to the headway spacing. What tools and strategies is Indianapolis using to try to maintain the headway spacing?
Right now, not very good ones. Our CAD system, the computer aided dispatch program, is they are developing a tool for us, but it's not ready yet. And so right now, our dispatch area basically just has to rely on the map. They see a map of where all the buses are, and they can they've got some rules of thumb to, how far away is 10 minutes from each other. And so they can see when they're starting to get too close to each other. If they get really bunched up, they can, if two buses arrive at the end of the line back to back, they will pull one of them off and express them back somewhere along the middle of the corridor to resume their trip. And then the other one will turn around. Right now we're trying to not instruct drivers that are going too quickly to slow down, because eventually all the operators that are slow right now will get better and get quicker. And so we don't want to artificially slow people down, because it is rapid transit after all. But our big challenge right now are the folks, the individual operators who are less comfortable and are going very slowly through that docking.
Okay. And so I guess while we're talking about this, and maybe we'll start with Justin and then ask Carrie, how does ADA loading affect the schedules? I assume if you have like an every 10-minute type of schedule, it's not like you're building in an extra amount of time, assuming that you're going to need to take more time. But are you noticing that it affects schedules? So Justin, let's start with you, and then Carrie, jump in.
For us, it does impact it, but what's one of the big benefits to the level boarding is that you don't have to deploy the big ramp, which takes a lot more time. And so that's one factor that allows people to get in more quickly. We also, on our buses, for the first time, are using a special type of wheelchair securement device, or mobility device securement, where the person in the mobility device can actually lock themselves into place. So it's they can kind of just wheel up to a backward-facing backboard, and then they hit a button, and there's a device that comes out and basically clamps their wheelchair into place. And then there's just a regular lap belt that they can pull across themselves to lock them into place. And so that has really sped up the securement process, and people seem to really like it as well.
And this is Carrie. We also have platform level boarding, which, as Justin mentioned, absolutely saves time. So customers wait at the marked place by the front door, so that when we do dock and the operator says, okay, you can come on in, then they just roll right on. So it does save time. It does make it easier. As far as impacting the schedule, when I ride, the longest that I think I ever saw it take for a mobility device to be secured was only about 2 minutes. And that was in part because we were crowded. And so we had to ask passengers who were already on the bus to please relocate farther back or please stand. So part of that time is actually not just getting the passenger loaded, it's negotiating with other passengers about priority seating. And I will say that that is something that we are having to educate our passengers about, because we do have a lot of new riders, people who have never ridden transit before, but they are riding the Pulse. They just don't know some of the basic rules of riding, and so they'll sit up front and think, well, but this is my seat, I got here first, and they don't understand that somebody who's coming on in a mobility device, that is their designated seat, because we do have to secure them down to the floor just like they would in a regular seat. And because we have bus-only lanes and TSP, those are all tools which help us make up those up to 2 minutes that we might lose while taking care of a mobility passenger.
All right, thanks. And Carrie, now let's stick with you for a couple of questions. Could you go into a little more detail on the traffic volumes in the corridor, I guess before and after?
Sure. So we're going to talk about first the vehicular traffic on primarily Broad Street, which is where most of our route is located. Prior to our project, I mean, this is a state highway. There were 3 travel lanes in each direction on this highway going through the city. And we did a traffic count analysis prior to the project and found that the traffic volumes on a 6-lane highway were still less than what a 4-lane highway could accommodate. So we were severely underutilizing the roadway space and felt completely safe taking over 2 of those interior travel lanes, or the exterior when we're curbside, to make them bus-only lanes. So that traffic data was definitely in our favor. After we have opened the project, this is really a bigger note about the greater Richmond region. For the first time in decades, really, Richmond's population is increasing. It's growing. So we are starting to see people coming back into a denser, more urban environment than in previous decades. So part of our traffic analysis is going to see that there will be an increase in vehicular traffic, but we're also seeing an increase in transit use. As I mentioned, 18% ridership increase in just a year, as more people are coming in and taking advantage of the useful transit that is now in place. As far as how the traffic safely is flowing with each other, it's still only a year in, but the traffic data that we have is showing that there has been a significant drop in accidents on the corridor, and there have not been any pedestrian fatalities that are directly related to anything with us being on the roadway, which is tremendous, and I'm knocking on all the wood in my room right now. But we are really proud of the design and the safety impacts and results of taking this type of action with the roadway.
Thanks. Are folding bikes, strollers, shopping carts, that kind of thing permitted on board the Pulse?
Yes, they are. We have not many customers that have a folding bike yet because they're still a little pricey, but I have seen a few of those come on. Scooters that are not gas powered, if they're just electric and they can fold down as well, I have also seen those on the bus. Strollers, of course, but just like any bus, we ask that the child be removed from their stroller and that you secure that stroller either in between your legs or underneath you at your seat, and keep the child held in your lap.
Thank you. We're going to move on and ask a few questions to David. David, that orange line, what was the residential density before rezoning?
So we haven't finished rezoning. We're in the process, but I don't know if I could tell you what the residential density is. I mean, some of the areas are very industrial, so there's no residential. So and then other parts are really commercial corridors where, once again, there's no residential. So these areas haven't been planned for since the 1990s, and so the current land uses really don't match up that well in certain areas with the bus with the BRT infrastructure, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to match things up. So North Hollywood is actually better. That station, that's a regional center, so there are actually a couple of towers there. When I say towers, I'm talking about 15 stories, which, you know, that's probably pretty tall for some parts of the country, but for the LA, not really, but for the valley it is. So a lot of, you know, you do have single family neighborhoods. You do have some low density multifamily in these areas. We think that with our proposed rezoning, we can get up to in the Van Nuys and Sepulveda station areas, 6-7 stories, mixed use buildings. And in North Hollywood, since it is a bigger regional center, we can mimic some of those 15-story, you know, 20-story building types.
All right. Regarding the walkabouts that you did with officials, was the plan created from that called the FLM Planning Strategic Plan?
So that was led by Metro. You know, I'm with the City of LA, Department of City Planning. Metro coordinated that, and they invited the various departments here with the city to take a walk with them throughout the station areas. And you know, once again, they identified deficiencies and opportunities for better first last mile connectivity. They created they're still creating some of the reports, but some of them have been finalized, and they just call them first last mile, you know, whatever the particular line is, whether it's or station, they call that particular station first last mile guidelines or report for potential first last mile connectivity.
Thanks. And so are there similar efforts related to the Orange Line working their way into other community plans across LA?
Yes. Initially, this work effort included 5 stations along the Orange Line. A couple of those stations in the western half of the San Fernando Valley, that work effort has been absorbed into another larger work effort in that part of the valley. So my colleagues, I have some colleagues who are working on updating some plans over there. So they're also looking at similar things. I think I showed that one photo of the Sherman Way station, which would look somewhat desolate. They're working on plans to try to add some intensity, some development there at that station, for example.
Thanks. Okay, let's see. Next question. This is for everybody. So let's start with Justin and kind of make our way around. Can you comment on or speak to winter operations? I know that for you, Justin and Carrie, you haven't even hit a week yet, really, for you, I think, Justin. But do you have are there plans or are there things in place to deal with the winter operation of your BRT?
Yeah, so yeah, obviously we have not actually operated through a winter yet, but I can touch a little bit on some of the things that we've put in place. One, I could have mentioned the snow melt system, snow and ice melt system on the platforms, which I think will help us out dramatically. Second, some of the snow removal from the lanes is really challenging in some of our configurations because it's so tight. And so we do have an interlocal agreement with the city department, and they have designated certain routes as what they call their shop routes, so kind of the highest priority corridors, and where they kind of designate one person, one truck for a few mile stretch, and they just go up and down that stretch, and they don't have other responsibilities, which we felt was necessary both from a prioritization standpoint as well as just the fact that some of these medians are fairly low profile, and so if they're buried under a foot of snow, unless you know where they are, you're not going to be able to see them. And so those are some of the big things that we put into place. We'll see it. I'll tell you in 6 months if they work.
I don't know if Carrie and David, if you have any comments on winter operation for anything.
This is Carrie in Richmond, and I do. We have operated through a winter, and we had a bit of a doozy in December of last year. We had about a foot of snow in Richmond, and that was our first really significant weather impact for our operation, not just for the Pulse, but for all of our buses. We actually had to suspend service because the conditions were just you couldn't even get around at all. Really in Richmond, once you hit 6 inches, that's when things shut down, and it's really challenging to get around on the roads and for our local crews to keep up with plowing. It's just a serious strain on them. So to double that and have a foot of snow was really challenging. So we ended up having to delay the start of service in the morning because it wasn't just letting the overnight plows do their job. It was also on our headquarters having to let our overnight plows do their job to plow out our buses, in some cases while it was still snowing during the event. And that required us to have a little bit of extra time before we could promise customers that we'll be out there. We do not run a schedule whenever we're on what we call snow routes. We will put as many buses out there as we can safely do, and we will operate service, but we will not be able to maintain headways. It's just not feasible during an active winter weather event. As far as the stations themselves, GRTC is responsible for maintaining the platforms during inclement weather. So we do have crews that are going out as soon as it's safe to start plowing, shoveling themselves, putting down the salt or the sand, whatever is appropriate for the situation. And if the event is still going on, then they have to go out multiple times if we are running service. The other challenge is even after the event is over, if we get really cold weather that settles into place after a snowstorm, then we'll get melting during the day with the sunshine and then refreezing after the sun sets and temperatures drop back below freezing. So that refreezing over and over again can lead to lingering impacts for several mornings. Even after the roads have been plowed and cleared, you still have to be super cognizant of the pedestrian safety leading up to the stations.
David, do you have anything to add about winter weather in BRTs?
Just being Los Angeles, if you want to come visit LA during the winter time, time to ride the BRT,
Thank you. Well, it's 2:30. It's time to wrap up already. This has been a great discussion, and I'll tell you, there's still a lot of questions in the queue. People, they have a lot of things going on. So folks, if you do have further questions, you can contact our panelists directly. And also remember that we are recording this webcast and we'll have it posted up on our YouTube channel here shortly. Just head over to YouTube and search Planning Webcast will pop up. And we'll also have a PDF of this presentation available on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. So thanks to the Transportation Planning Division of APA for hosting today's session, and to our speakers, Justin, Carrie, and David, for joining us. Everyone have a great weekend, and we'll talk next time. Thanks, everybody.